Okay, so this is the part 3 and hopefully the last part of this chapter, lecture 3 or part 3 of 3. Nationalism in India, NCERT, class 10 CBSE. So in this we had done till here and we are at section 3.3 where we have to start from the limits of civil disobedience. If we quickly run through what we have done so far, nationalism in India, how this concept started here. We were a colonial power of the Britishers. They were ruling us, so every class, every citizen was affected by that, and there were hardships in their rule, and prices were very high. People had to pay a lot of taxes. The Britishers, they wanted to finance their World War, their participation in the World War One, and because of that, they increased the taxes on people here and citizens, and which became very difficult for them to pay. And also there was the failure of the crop, and people were suffering, and their hardships increased. In 1918, 19 and 1920, 21, the crops failed, and then there was influenza epidemic, in which almost 13 million people died, which was in 1921, and people thought that all these hardships will finish with the World War, which ended, but these hardships continued even after the war ended. So they said that enough is enough, and we have to do something about it. So they decided to start a movement, and they rallied behind Mahatma Gandhi, who had come from South Africa to India, back to India in 1915, and he had his own, idea of fighting this war against the Britishers, and he said that we are going to follow the idea of satyagraha, where there is you try to appeal to the conscience of the oppressor,
Yeah.
by letting them know that they are, making it by voicing your concerns about the way they are exploiting Indians. And he said that if you are fighting for the truth,
You will
then
prevail.
you will be, yes, you will prevail, you will win. So Satyagraha started. This idea was taken to different parts of India, to Bihar, to other parts of India by Mahatma Gandhi, and then it actually the non-violent civil disobedience and the non-cooperation movement started when the Rowlatt Act was brought in 1919, which gave sweeping powers to the government, and said that they could detain political prisoners for up to 2 years without trial. This was unjust, and so on the 6th of April in 1919, Mahatma Gandhi started the Non-Violent Civil Disobedience Rowlatt Act. Basically, this was called Rowlatt Satyagraha,
Yeah.
which was against Satyagraha, against Rowlatt Act. Yes, in which the hartal or the strike started. People stopped, working in their positions where they had to, in the government offices, in schools, in colleges. They closed shops and all that. So the government wanted to stop all that. So they, clamped down on satyagrahis, and they attacked them. Then the Jallianwala Bagh massacre happened on 13th of April 1919 because of the violence, basically because of all the non-cooperation from Indians. They were not working in their offices, in their government offices, and they were not going to their schools and colleges. They were not buying their stuff.
They
So because
also
of-
attacked banks and post offices.
Yeah.
After in Amritsar, the police fired on a peaceful procession. After that, the Jallianwala Bagh massacre.
Yeah, so because of all this, they had imposed the martial law.
law.
Martial law under General Dyer, and martial law, while the martial law was imposed on 13th of April 1919, people came to Amritsar fair. It was a fair where people get together on Baisakhi, and they celebrate. So people in Amritsar, they were protesting against the Rowlatt Act, but people from nearby villages also came there. and they were not aware that the martial law was in force.
Imposed, yeah.
Yes, and but to punish them, General Dyer, he closed the only entrance of Jallianwala Bagh and ordered firing on these people, in which 380 people died, and that obviously made people of India very angry. They started attacking government installations, their buildings and all, and in response to that, the government also fought back. The British police, they were very brutal, and they punished Indians and attacked them also.
The crawling order and stuff.
Yeah, all that happened. General Dyer gave the crawling
Yeah.
orders and all. Then Khilafat issue came, where Gandhiji tried to rope in Muslims also through the Khilafat issue. We have talked about it already, and then he said that why we should go for non-cooperation, because he said that non-cooperation because Britishers have been able to come to India only because Indians have cooperated with them, and if India stops cooperating with Britishers, they will have to go
Leave.
back, and they will not have any choice.
Their rule will collapse.
That's right. So non-cooperation and Khilafat movement came together, and so it came to be known as non-cooperation Khilafat movement. So which was in 1921. So different people had different aspirations, and expectations from the non-cooperation movement. Number one was non-cooperation movement was confined to towns and cities. It had not been taken to the villages. So in towns and cities, the business class, the rich peasants, they supported the non-cooperation movement because they did not want the rich peasants didn't want to pay taxes
And revenues.
and revenues to the government, and the business class, they didn't want that imported goods should come in, so
Yeah.
that people buy their own stuff. So and even travel peasants, the poor peasants and travel peasants, the poor peasants, they didn't want to pay taxes to the talukdars and to the landlords. So they expected those taxes to be abolished. And tribal peasants, they were not allowed to go to the forests and all, and to graze their cattle and pick fruits and fuel wood. So they thought that all this would be finished, and then in plantation, Swaraj, we have talked about all this. Plantation workers in Assam, they also thought that they would have the freedom of going out, because they had to be confined to those tea gardens,
fields.
tea gardens, and so they thought that once Swaraj is there, self rule is there, then they will have the freedom and people will be able to move out freely. Congress, they had another expectation or interpretation of Swaraj. They didn't look at Swaraj as freedom in a particular area or for a particular class. They said that it would be freedom for the entire country. But the problem was that no one had very clearly explained the vision of Swaraj to anyone. So towards then Chauri Chaura 1922, this attack happened on peaceful protesters. Many people died there in Gorakhpur, UP, and that was a time when Mahatma Gandhi called out the non-cooperation movement.
Then they did civil disobedience.
Then we had the Simon Commission coming in. They wanted to create the Constitution of India, but the problem was that there was no Indian in this commission. All were Britishers, so which was not acceptable to Indians, and they demanded that Simon Commission goes back. 1928, when they came here, they were greeted with "Go back, Simon" chants. So all these things we had done. Then
the
Salt
Dandi
March, yes, the Salt March or the Dandi March happened, which started the
Civil
civil disobedience
disobedience.
movement in 1930. For the first time, Indians made salt, and they had to pay taxes on salt, but and they were not allowed to make salt on
So
their
they
own.
broke the law.
So they broke the law.
as a demonstration to say that we're not ruled by you anymore.
Yes,
Leave and don't come back.
yes, and when they did that, then the police attacked them and punished them by arresting a lot of people. Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, who was a devout disciple of Mahatma Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru, all these people were arrested. So again, there were attacks on British installations and government buildings by the Satyagrahis. And then there was a pact between Viceroy Irwin and Mahatma Gandhi in 1931, March 5th, that they would have a roundtable conference and the political leaders will be freed. But the roundtable conference failed, and Gandhiji went to London in 1931 December and came back without any gains. So that put people in some kind of a doubt about the movement, and lot of people started falling out. Rich peasants who wanted to support the movement, they fell out because they saw that Gandhiji went to roundtable conference, second roundtable conference, nothing came out of it. So this is what we studied, and the poor peasants, they were not willing to be part of this thing anymore, because
Congress was unwilling to support no rent campaigns in
yes, because they were still they still had to pay the rent to the landlords and talukdars, so their miseries were not coming to any end. And business class also, first they wanted to finance the non-cooperation movement so that the British colonial, so that they have a free environment for their business. But they did not, they withdrew support later on because nothing came out of
they were also worried about disruption of business due to prolonged militant activities. So
Okay, participation of women. We saw that women were very much a part of the Dandi March and the entire Satyagraha movement, the national movement, but they were not really given any the position in Congress or any position of authority. So here we are. We had covered all these topics we just talked about in detail in lecture 1, part 1 and part 2, and this is the third and last part of this chapter, Nationalism in India. So now we come to the limits of civil disobedience. Limits of civil disobedience means, who are the people who are not whole hog, supporting it. So Dalits, first of all, Dalits were the oppressed class. They were the untouchables. They were untouchables because they were the bhangis. They were called. It was a derogatory term in a way. It's supposed to be a derogatory term back in India, but that's what they were called. So bhangis were the people who would clean the toilets and all, and collect garbage, and so there was a class which was supposed to do this work. So washermen, dhobis and nais and all these people, this was their caste, and only these kind of people would be doing it. So that is why they were untouchables, because they would collect garbage and do this kind of cleaning and all that.
Weren't untouchables also those who violated caste rules or something?
No, the lower class, the lowest of the lowest, they were the untouchables.
I see.
Okay.
So any low caste was super low caste was,
especially Dalits, basically, because they were doing this kind of work. Yes.
That's kind of.
So untouchables in 1930s had begun to call themselves Dalits or oppressed. Dalit means oppressed.
Well, Dalit doesn't mean oppressed, does it?
Yeah. They started calling themselves Dalit or oppressed.
Oh wow.
Yes. So they did not want to be a part of the non-cooperation movement or the civil disobedience movement. Why? Because they said that we are not going to get anything out of it. But they wanted to be they wanted that they have some reserved seat in the councils and in the jobs and all those things. Yes, for long Congress had ignored the Dalits. Why? Because they did not want to offend the Sanatanis. Sanatanis were the higher class, the high caste Hindus, because Sanatanis, they did not want to deal with these people. They called them untouchables, and they didn't want to include them in the mainstream. So Congress wanted to be with the didn't want to offend the high class Hindus, which were the Sanatanis, and that is why they didn't include Dalits. So, but Mahatma Gandhi, he said that if Swaraj has to succeed, it would not come for 100 years. It means Swaraj would not come, yani self-rule will not come in 100 years if untouchability was not eliminated. He said, and he gave a different name to untouchables, Harijans. Hari is God, and Jan is children of God, right? Hari is God, and Jan is children of God. So he also organized satyagraha to secure them entry into temples. So untouchables or these guys Harijans, they were not allowed to enter the temples. So then he secured that they get an entry into the temples, and they were not able to collect water from public wells. So Gandhiji ensured that happens, and tanks and roads and schools. So he put them, those people, he tried to give them a level playing field. Yes. And he himself, Gandhiji, cleaned toilets to dignify the work of bhangis, the sweepers. So he went and cleaned the toilets himself, so that people stop looking down upon this kind of work, because work is work, right?
Yeah.
And he also persuaded upper caste people to change their heart and give up the sin of untouchability. He said that untouchability is a sin, so you should not commit this sin. Give it up. But many Dalit leaders were keen on a different political solution to the problem of the community. And what was the solution according to them? They said that we should get reserved seats in educational institutions, because we are the downtrodden, we are the oppressed, and we don't have a level playing field.
They're automatically at a disadvantage.
Yes.
Because they've been shunned for so long.
So they say that we should be given reservation. Some seats should be reserved in educational institutions, and they said that we should have a separate electorate. Separate electorate means that because they were few in numbers, so if the whole community is choosing their leaders, their leader would not get chosen.
Yeah.
Right. And especially the high caste Hindus would not choose a Dalit leader. So they said that we should have a separate electorate, which means that Dalits should choose their own leader.
Yeah, Dalits should choose a Dalit leader that represents them in
the legislative council.
Well,
yes. In the legislative council. So they said that they thought that political empowerment would solve all their problems and give them some kind of a status in the society.
Yes.
So Dalits in the Maharashtra region, Nagpur region, they were more organized, and they were more in number, and they had a stronger organization. So Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, he was their leader. He organized the Dalits into Depressed Classes Association in 1930, and he had an argument with Mahatma Gandhi at the second roundtable conference by demanding separate electorates for Dalits. This is what they were saying before, right? Separate electorates. So B.R. Ambedkar, he said that we should have separate electorate for Dalits. But Gandhiji did not want this, because he said that if they are given a separate, so which means that we are officially accepting the fact that they are different. They are different. They are oppressed. They are untouchable. So we are making a different arrangement for you. They would not be able to. Gandhiji would not be able to bring them in the mainstream and give them an equal status like others.
Exactly.
So he said, no. We should not have a separate electorate for you. Okay. So later on, this is what he said. But Britishers, they were clever, and they considered they saw that this kind of a divide is happening in the society.
Yeah.
And there is at least someone is there to oppose the civil disobedience movement. So they said, okay, yes, Ambedkarji, you are right. We will accept your demand. We will give you a separate electorate. When this happened, then Gandhiji was very sad, and he went on a fast unto death.
So he won't eat anything until either his request is accepted or he dies.
Right.
Yikes.
So he believed that if separate electorate is given to Dalits, that would slow down the process of their integration into the society. And Ambedkar ultimately, but later on, so Ambedkar ji, he later on understood Gandhiji's concern and he accepted, and the Pune Pact of September 1932 happened, in which Ambedkar ji, he agreed that okay fine, we are not going to have a separate electorate. So separate electorate would not be there, but this pact said that there would be reserved seats for Dalits. Okay, so you know what, which means
so
that
the entire country will elect normal leaders as well as Dalit leaders.
as so if like you and I, we are not Dalits. If we have to, we are going like the normal in the normal election, but we know that there are four seats are there for Dalits.
Yeah.
So Dalit candidate would be there. So there would be maybe 10 Dalit candidates, and we have to choose 4 out of those because there are 4 seats for them. So everyone, even the person who is not a Dalit, will be able to choose those leaders.
The Dalit leaders.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there will be Dalit leaders for the reserved seat. It's not that only Dalits are voting for them.
Yeah. So the entire country is voting.
Right.
To elect Dalit leaders.
Yes. So it gave depressed classes, later to be known as scheduled class, reserve seats in provincial and central legislative council, but they were to be voted in the general electorate, right? General electorate,
yes.
Not a separate electorate.
Yes.
So you understood this?
Yes.
The difference?
Yes.
Separate electorate would be if Dalits only were voting for their leaders. Now
the entire country is voting for
yes.
Dalit
So representation will be there.
Yeah.
Okay, it doesn't matter if they are few or more, or upper caste is not voting for them. You have to vote for them, and you have to vote for some Dalit leaders because they have some reserved seats in that. So this was an amicable solution. Okay, the Dalit movement, however, continued to be apprehensive of the Congress-led national movement. Now let us see. So Dalits they had a lukewarm response for civil disobedience. Now
it was sort of, sort of unstable. Like they didn't have some people were like yeah, some people were like no, and it was just like a sort of rocky this thing, right?
Yeah, I mean lukewarm is like not totally against it, but you're not like so much for it either.
Yeah.
So the same was the case with the Muslims also. Muslim also had lukewarm response. Why? Because some of the Muslim political organizations in India were also lukewarm in their response to the civil disobedience movement. So the non-cooperation Khilafat movement had failed in the sense that they were not together anymore, and there were certain reasons for it, and we will see it here now. A large section of Muslims felt alienated from Congress. From the mid-1920s, the Congress came to be more visibly associated with openly Hindu religious nationalist groups like Hindu Mahasabha.
I see.
So they were more dominant, in Congress.
Well, obviously.
Yes, they were more dominant, and Muslims were rather, on the back seat. So as relations between Hindus and Muslims worsened, each community organized religious processions with militant fervor. So this would provoke Hindu-Muslim communal clashes.
Yikes.
Yes, and riots in various cities. Every riot deepened the distance between the two communities. Right.
Yeah.
The Congress and Muslim League made efforts to renegotiate an alliance in 1927, and it appeared that they were very close to an alliance, but it did not happen. The important differences were over the question of representation in the future assemblies that were to be elected. Okay, so this was the main reason. Who would represent? Whether it would be so there should be either equal representation, or there should be some kind of a fair proportion, which was not happening. Muhammad Ali Jinnah, he was one of the top leaders of Muslim League.
I see.
Yes, Muslim League, and he was willing to give up the demand of separate electorate.
They were also asking for
yes, they were also
okay.
And he said that we are willing to give up the demand for separate electorate if Muslims were assured reserved seats like Dalits in the Central Assembly. Okay.
Yes.
And representation in proportion to population in the Muslim-dominated provinces, Bengal and Punjab.
Punjab was a Muslim-dominated province?
Yes.
Is it still a Muslim-dominated province?
Mostly Sikhs. Yes. So they said that in areas like in states like Bengal and West Bengal and Punjab, where there is a majority of Muslims, there we should have more seats. Remember, we studied in Belgium in
Yeah.
civics.
Yeah.
You know, the distribution of power, right?
Yes,
That's what.
yes.
So they went for equal distribution.
Equal distribution
Of
exactly.
power. So so here, even though in Brussels there were more French and less
Dutch.
but
Yeah, in the entire country there were more Dutch and less French.
yes.
So
So there they gave equal seats, and no,
yeah, yes they did.
they gave.
Yes.
And so here again, so the Muslims said that in states where we have more people staying there, so we should have the representation in proportion
Yeah.
to our
Population.
right? So negotiations were over the question of representation continued, but all hopes of resolving the issue at the All Parties Conference in 1928 disappeared when M.R. Jayakar, he was the Hindu Mahasabha leader, and he strongly opposed efforts of any compromise with the Muslim League.
And why so?
Yeah, they did not want that Muslims should be represented by them in the National Assembly, in the Central Assembly for Congress.
Yeah.
And so Muslim League also said, well, this is not how we are going to support you,
Yeah.
and this is not how we are going to, if you are Hindu dominated and you are not willing to give us reserved seats or representation in this future Central Assembly, why are we going to
Why should we
support
help you?
support your civil disobedience
Yeah.
movement? Or
But I mean, it's probably a dumb question, but like, Muslims were also a part of India, so why were people alienating them? Like, Swaraj or independence was supposed to be
Yes.
the right of every single Indian, right?
That's right. That's
Like,
right.
well, what happened to that?
Yes, and a whole lot of Muslim leaders also were part of the national movement.
Yeah.
Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, for one, was a very close disciple of Mahatma
Yeah.
Gandhi. So when the civil disobedience movement started, there was thus an atmosphere of suspicion and distrust between communities, right?
Something that continues till today.
Right. And alienated from the Congress, large sections of Muslims would not respond to the call for a united struggle
Yeah.
because they were feeling alienated.
Like, if you're not getting anything back,
Yes.
then why would you?
Yeah,
participate?
you're feeling alienated.
Exactly.
And many Muslim leaders and intellectuals expressed their concern about the status of Muslims as a minority within India. Okay, so they said that this is a matter of concern. We are considered a minority community in India, and that is why we are not being given our due. So they feared that the culture and identity of minorities would be submerged under the domination of Hindu majority, right?
Yeah.
Which means that they would have to that Hindus are going to get all the leading positions in the Central
Muslims are gonna
Assembly,
be forgotten.
and we are just going to be there,
Sort of just
may-
watching from the
maybe
outside.
maybe just like women were there,
Exactly.
right? So in 1930, Sir Muhammad Iqbal, as president of the Muslim League, okay, Sir Muhammad Iqbal, he was the president of the Muslim League,
Muslim League.
which was a political party of the Muslims. He reiterated the importance of separate electorates.
Yes.
He said we should have a separate electorate for the Muslims as an important safeguard for the minority political interest. And his statement, you getting me?
Yes.
He said that Hindus are not going to vote for us.
Obviously not. We're gonna be oppressed, so
Right.
we need some way to
Yeah.
represent ourselves to
Yeah.
give us a separate electorate.
Separate electorate. So his statement is supposed to have provided the intellectual justification for the Pakistan demand that came up in subsequent years. Okay, so whatever he said, it's supposed to have. Sorry.
It's down here.
Yes. To have provided the intellectual justification. So he gave an intellectual
Yes.
justification why Pakistan should be made, because if in India we are not going to get elected, then fine, make Pakistan.
Give us our own country.
Right. So this is what he said. I have no hesitation in declaring that if the principle of Indian Muslims, if the principle that Indian Muslim is entitled to full and free development, okay, on the lines of his own culture and tradition in his own Indian homelands, is recognized as a basis of a permanent communal settlement, we will be ready to stake his all for the freedom of India.
Yeah.
Which means that if a Muslim is given a full chance to develop
Grow
himself and
prosper.
grow, prosper according to his culture and tradition in free India, then we are going to do our best, and we are ready to our level best. We are ready to die. We are ready to fight this, that, for the freedom of India. But if this does not happen, then then it's a matter of concern, which means that you are not given the right to grow your culture and live according to your beliefs and all that. So the principle that each group is entitled to free development on its own lines is not inspired by any feeling of narrow communalism. This is what he said.
Yeah.
That we are not saying that. He said that a community which is inspired by feeling of ill will towards other communities is low. Okay, so we should not have any ill will towards other communities, because this feeling is low and ignoble.
Yeah.
I entertain the highest respect for the customs, laws, religions, and social institutions of other communities.
Yeah.
Nay, it is my duty, according to the teachings of the Quran, even to defend their places of worship, if need be, because it is my country.
Yes.
Okay. Yet I love the communal group, which is a source of life and behavior, and which has formed me what I am by giving me its religion, its literature, its thought, its culture, and thereby its whole past, which is Muslims, Islam. Its whole past as a living operative factor in my present consciousness. So communalism in its higher aspect then is indispensable to the formation of a harmonious whole in a country like India.
Yeah.
Right? So communalism is important. You cannot ignore the fact that there are people of different communities in India. Which means if there are people of different communities, there has to be, their representation should be there, their voices should be heard, and the dominant community should not just be there in the forefront.
Exactly. Every community should have a say.
Right. So the units of Indian society are not territorial as in European countries. They were not territorial.
Yeah.
The units of the Indian society were not territorial. The principle of European democracy cannot be applied to India without recognizing the fact of communal groups. The Muslim demand for the creation of a Muslim India within India, which he means Pakistan, therefore is perfectly justified. The Hindu thinks that separate electorates are contrary to the spirit of true nationalism, because he understands the word nation to mean a kind of universal amalgamation in which no communal entity ought to retain its private individuality. Right? Because Hindus are saying that was just one nation, so, and there should not be any separate electorate and all this for that.
Yes.
But you cannot forget the fact that there are other communities also who are not in majority.
Exactly.
Right. So such a state of things, however, does not exist. Such a state of things, however, does not exist. India is a land of racial and religious variety.
Yeah. It's very diverse.
Right. Add to this the general economic inferiority of Muslims, their enormous debt, especially in the Punjab, and their insufficient majorities in some of the provinces, as at present constituted, and you will begin to see clearly the meaning of our anxiety to retain separate electorates.
Why did Muslims have debt? Like, debt to who? The colonial people, or?
Debt. Economically they were not very sound.
That's true.
right? And I'm not too sure about the debt. Maybe they have taken debt from other people, from maybe from some organizations. So I'm not very clear on that.
How much do we have left?
We'll check that, huh?
Just you scroll down. How much do we have left?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
it. That's it.
Oh.
No. This is a conclusion. We just these are pictures, big pictures.
Okay,
That's it.
okay.
All right. So here we are, the sense of collective belonging. Then, now here we are talking about the national symbols and icons, like in nationalism in Europe, you had
Yeah.
Germania, you had flags.
Yeah.
So
Personification of the
personification of the nation, yes, because people like to see something concrete
nation. Yeah.
that they can follow, that they can relate to, right? And nationalism is a very abstract concept
Idea,
or
yeah.
idea. So and the villagers and poor people who are not very educated and all, they will it is difficult for them to understand this concept and identify with it. So even in Europe, they gave a face to the
Yeah.
nation, motherland, fatherland. France says fatherland, right?
Yeah.
Yes. And Germany says motherland, Germania,
Yeah.
right? Likewise, India came up with Bharat Mata.
Yeah.
Bharat Mata, Mother India.
Mother India.
Mother
yeah.
India, yes. So nationalism spreads when people begin to believe that they are all part of the same nation, when they discover some unity that binds them together. But how did the nation become a reality in the minds of people? So here, and how did they get a sense of collective belonging? So this sense of collective belonging came with first of all, with the experience of a united struggle.
As we said in nationalism, that is one of the most important criterias that help form, a nation state, which is struggles and sacrifices that you've made together to get to where you are. So,
Right.
yeah.
And this sense of collective belonging came partly through the experience of united struggles, right? And also cultural processes through
Yeah.
which nationalism captured people's imagination. People, you should discover your own culture. If everyone is from the same culture, then they identify with each other, right? So history and fiction, folklore and songs, popular prints and symbols all played a part in the making of nationalism.
Yeah,
Right.
again, we see here this is romantic nationalism that this is an example of.
Yes, that's right. Now, Bharat Mata as sign of romantic nationalism, which we studied in chapter 1, European nationalism in Europe. So there, they call this romantic nationalism, where a feeling about your nation, of a feeling of pride and feeling of love is developed towards your nation through a common culture, common dances, common music, common song, common art, right? Yeah, so it's something similar. So Bharat Mata as sign of nationalism. The identity of the nation, as we saw in chapter 1, it comes with symbols and figures or images, right?
Yeah.
So in the 20th century, this concept of Bharat Mata came up. Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay. Here is his.
But it says Chatterjee there.
Huh? Chandra Chattopadhyay.
But it says Chatterjee there.
He is known by both the names. This is his name on Bankim Chandra Chatterjee or Chattopadhyay. Both the names he is known
I see.
by. Okay, this is the guy who is on the Indian stamp. He was born in 1838 and died in 1894. So well before 1920, where we picked this movement from.
Nationalism.
Right. So Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay, he came up with the idea of Vande Mataram in 1970. In 1870s, he wrote Vande Mataram. Vande Mataram, is a song, a patriotic song.
Patriotic song.
Vande Mataram. Vande Mataram means Vande of your mother.
Yeah. What language is it?
Vande Mataram. This is Hindi.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. Hindi, I think, or maybe Sanskrit.
Okay.
So in 1870s, he wrote Vande Mataram, as a hymn to the motherland, and later it was included in his novel Anand Mat. Anand Mat, he wrote a novel and widely sung during the Swadeshi movement in Bengal. Then Bharat Mata. Okay. Abanindra Nath Tagore. Abanindra Nath Tagore.
It's not Rabindranath Tagore?
No, Rabindranath Tagore will come later.
Okay.
So this is Abanindra Nath Tagore. He made this picture. He was a painter.
Yes.
Okay, he was a famous painter, and this is figure 12. He made the first painting of Bharat Mata as ascetic or self-disciplined figure. Ascetic or self-disciplined figure. She is calm and composed, divine and spiritual.
I see.
Right. And also you see that she is, you know, a mother, a figure that does not that even the poor can identify with.
Yeah.
She is not wearing a lot of ornaments and jewelry, so even the poor can identify with her. So mother figure here is shown as dispensing learning, food and clothing. So learning,
Yes.
and food and clothing, and she
Yeah.
is also spiritual, so she has this, you know,
Mala.
beads, mala. So she has mala in one hand, emphasizing her ascetic quality or
Yeah.
self-disciplined spiritual quality. And Abanindra Nath Tagore, like Ravi Verma before him, tried to develop a style of painting that could be seen as truly Indian. Yeah, it's a very Indian.
I see. When was this painted? 1905. Okay.
1905.
Yes.
Okay. In subsequent years, the image of Bharat Mata acquired many different forms, as in figure 14, as you can see here. So circulated in popular prints and was painted by different artists. So this figure of Bharat Mata is a contrast to the one painted by Abanindra Nath Tagore. Here she is shown with a trishul, standing beside a lion and an elephant, both symbols of power and authority.
I see.
So now here we are being more assertive, right? So that we are not a laid back nation. This is Bharat Mata. She also has authority. She has power. She okay, and she has a trishul that she is ready to fight also, right? So this was the nationalism, national symbols
Yeah.
by Bharat Mata,
Or
about Bharat Mata. Then folklore as sign of nationalism. Ideas of nationalism also developed through movement or to revive Indian folklore. In the late 19th century, in
Yeah.
the late 19th century, India, nationalists began recording folk tales sung by bards or poets, and they toured villages. Yes. Yep. So another 10 minutes, I guess. Yeah. So in late 19th century, nationalists began recording folk tales sung by bards or poets.
Well, this is quite an untimely interruption.
Just 5 minutes.
And we are back.
Okay. So they traveled to these places, and they collected the folk tales, like they had done in Germany also.
Yeah.
You know, two brothers, they went around and collected poems and tales.
The Wolfgang brothers? I think
Something
it
like
was?
that. I don't clearly remember, but yes, they were two brothers who did this job.
Not the Wolf. No, not the Wolf.
Okay.
Whatever.
So, and these tales were they believe gave a true picture of traditional culture that had been corrupted and damaged by outside forces. So we had a very rich culture, painting, history,
Yeah.
art, music, but the other cultures had come from outside. Other forces from outside had come and they had destroyed it. Britishers. It was essential to preserve this folk tradition because Britishers thought that Indians are incapable of ruling themselves, are incapable of making constitution, or so everywhere they have to come in. They look down upon Indians. So here we are trying to again, give confidence to people and take pride in their past, in their culture, in their art. So these were all symbols of nationalism, folklore, and songs and all this.
Yes.
So it was essential to preserve this folk tradition in order to discover one's national identity and restore a sense of pride in one's past. So we should be proud of our past. So in Bengal, now here, Rabindranath Tagore himself began collecting ballads, nursery rhymes, and myths, and led to the movement of folk revival. Okay, Rabindranath Tagore, if you have seen his figure, beard, long
I
beard.
haven't seen him, but I obviously know him. I mean, who doesn't? But I have never seen Rabindranath Tagore.
Okay, we'll just see him. Why does it take ages to open, man?
Give it a second. You're not typing.
Huh?
I think it's frozen. I don't know why. Just leave it. Just
Wow.
leave it. Just leave it. Just close it.
There is no internet?
No.
Yeah.
It's
No.
Ethernet.
I
Connected Ethernet. Yeah. It's just delayed. It's. Just leave it. Whatever.
How does it happen?
Nah, it's frozen. Google's
Frozen?
frozen. Whatever. It's fine.
I'll show you. Rabindranath Tagore. So he also collected ballads and dramas, plays, nursery rhymes and myths, and led the movement to folk revival. In Madras, Natesa Shastri, he published a massive 4-volume collection of Tamil folk tales,
Yeah.
the folklore of southern India. He believed that folklore was national literature. It was the most trustworthy manifestation of people's real thoughts and characteristics. Right? So people's real thoughts and characteristics would come in folklore.
Yes.
As the national movement developed, nationalist leaders became more and more aware of such icons and symbols in unifying people and inspiring in them a feeling of nationalism. Right? So as the national movement developed, these leaders, they talked more about these symbols and all, so that people are feeling patriotic, and a feeling of nationalism is generated in
Yeah.
everyone's heart. Then the Indian flag as sign of nationalism.
Yes.
During the Swadeshi movement in Bengal, a tricolor flag, red, green, and yellow, was designed. Okay, Swadeshi movement.
Swadeshi was like independence movement.
No, Swadeshi is our country. Swadesh.
yeah.
Swadesh is my country.
Yeah, so Swadeshi
It's
movement.
national movement.
National.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
National movement or Swadeshi movement in Bengal. During the Swadeshi movement in Bengal, a tricolor flag was made, red, green, and yellow. It had 8 lotuses representing 8 provinces of British India. Okay, Swadeshi movement. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
It had
Anyway.
8 lotuses representing 8. Actually, I don't know why this is not working, but I had seen these. All these flags are available.
It won't work. It won't work. Just leave it.
Okay, fine.
Wait, I have an idea. Maybe quit. And then open it again. 1 second. Whatever, just leave it. I'll deal with it later. Yes.
Okay, it had 8 lotuses before, representing 8 provinces of British India, and a crescent moon representing Hindus and Muslims.
Yes.
Okay. So by 1921, Gandhiji had designed the Swaraj flag. Okay.
Yes.
It again had tricolors, red, green, and white.
Red.
This time, yellow is not there. In place of yellow, we have white, and had a spinning wheel.
Yeah.
Charkha in the center, representing the Gandhian ideal of self-help. Okay, carrying the flag, holding it aloft during marches became a symbol of defiance.
So when was it changed to orange?
Um, we'll have to see that. Reinterpretation of history as sign of nationalism. Another orange. This is what it is. You know, it was orange or saffron.
I see. Oh,
Yes.
okay, yeah.
Red is saffron only.
Okay.
But yes, later on the charkha came. You know,
Yeah,
I
instead of
mean,
the entire
Ashok Chakra came in place of the spinning wheel. Yes. So another reinterpretation of history as sign of nationalism. Yes. Now we talk about history. That this is our history. We should take pride in our history,
Yes.
and this is also a sign of nationalism. Another means of creating a feeling of nationalism was through reinterpretation of history. By the end of the 19th century, many Indians began feeling that to instill a sense of pride in the nation, Indian history had to be thought about differently. The Britishers saw Indians as backward and primitive, incapable of governing themselves. In response, Indians began looking into the past to discover India's great achievements. Okay, we discovered zero and lots of medicines, lots of things in science and mathematics. Yes, they wrote about glorious developments in ancient times when art and architecture, science and mathematics, religion and culture, law and philosophy, crafts and trade had flourished. This glorious time, in their view, was followed by a history of decline when India was colonized. These nationalist histories urge the readers to take pride in India's great achievements in the past and struggle to change the miserable conditions of life under British rule. These efforts to unify people were not without problems. When the past was being glorified, the past was glorified was Hindu. Right?
What?
When the past being glorified was Hindu.
Yeah.
Yes, the past that they were talking about
Was mainly Hindu.
Mainly Hindu past. Yes.
Yes.
When the images celebrated were drawn from Hindu iconography, when people of other communities felt left out.
Yeah.
Right. So in earlier times, this is Trinicharan Chattopadhyay, Bharat Barshar Itihas, the history of Bharatvarsh. Bharatvarsh is also a name for Bharat. You know, हमारा भारतवर्ष, भारतवर्ष हम कहते हैं, our Bharatvarsh.
Okay.
So history of India.
Yes.
In the history of India, he has written, in earlier times, foreign travelers in India marveled at the courage, truthfulness, and modesty of the people of Arya Vamsa.
What is that?
Aryans, they were Indians. You know, they are supposed to be the descendants of Aryans.
But Aryans,
Aryan Vamsa.
I'm confused.
We'll have to look this up. I'm not too sure about
Okay.
it. Okay. So Indians now they remark mainly on the absence of those qualities.
Yeah.
Okay, now we don't talk about their courage, truthfulness, and modesty of people. In those days, Hindus would would set out on conquests and hoist their flags in Tartar, China, and other countries. Now, a few soldiers from a tiny island far away are lording it over the land of India.
So where's Tartar?
I don't know.
The people. They need to provide more references. Anyway, it's fine.
Yeah, we'll see. So here's the conclusion. Yeah, read on.
A growing anger against the colonial government was thus bringing together various groups and classes of Indians into a common struggle for freedom for the first half of the 20th century. As we saw, there was a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of people rallied behind Mahatma Gandhi when he came back from South Africa, because people were fed up. They were done. They'd had enough of the colonial government and they wanted them out. So the Congress, under the leadership of Mahatma Gandhi, tried to channel the people's grievances into organized movements for independence. Through such movements, the nationalists tried to forge a national unity. But as we've seen, diverse groups and classes participated in these movements with varied aspirations and expectations. As the grievances were wide-ranging, freedom from colonial rule also meant different things to different people. The Congress continuously attempted.
We saw how
we saw how, for example, the Alluri Sitaram, I forgot his last name. Alluri Sitaram
Raju.
yes. He did not believe in non-violence, and he led.
And also, you know, the rich peasants, the
poor
business
peasants,
class,
the business
tribal
class,
peasants, they had plantation
different-
workers, they
yeah.
had different aspirations.
And many of them, we saw many a times people got violent, you know, so that kind of destroyed the entire purpose of Swaraj.
Okay.
Anyway, so the Congress continuously attempted to resolve differences and ensure that the demands of one group did not alienate another. This is precisely why the unity within the movement often broke down. The high point of Congress activity and nationalist unity were followed by phases of disunity and inner conflict between groups. As we saw, people were skeptical when the civil disobedience movement was relaunched in 1932, and they
demanded for separate.
Dalits
electorate.
demanded for a separate electorate. Muslims and Hindus started, fighting and mistrusting or not. There was suspicion, distrust between the communities.
Right.
So, in conclusion,
the high point of Congress activity and national unity
were followed by phases of disunity and inner conflict.
Okay, yes.
So, in other words, what was emerging was a nation with many voices wanting freedom from colonial rule.
Right.
And that brings us to the end of this lesson. Somehow.
Part 3 of 3.
Part 3 of 3, and there we go. That's nationalism in India.
Yep.
So
now we have to see the questions and answers, which we'll do later.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes. So
That's it.
if you close that's not going to do anything.
Okay. Okay, sorry. We have to go here.
Technical difficulty.